overly shielding a boy would make him feminine, then now you understand why you have to overly shield a woman to allow her to be feminine.
You know, when you're a kid, you're just doing whatever you want to do. You're not worried about getting hurt. You're not worried about whatever because you know that your parents will be there. You know that it'll be fine. Like, you'll figure it out. Like, you're just going for it because you have this protection of your parents. I don't want to say totally carefree because when you're adult, there's obviously things that are going to be on your mind. But it was almost like feeling like a child again in the sense of that I didn't have all these masculine responsibilities. I could just be feminine. I could just be a woman for like the first time. And, you know, we watched a video about a guy who was saying that like he wouldn't even call a lot of men. He'd call them males or something like that, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
like being a man involves a lot of the characteristics that we talk about, like providing and protecting, and not just like, oh, well, I'll get the intruders when they break in. No, it's like protecting in all the senses, especially emotionally, like we talked about. Like, a woman can only be feminine with safety.
Yeah.
That's the only way. And that's why you can take a feminist woman and make her more feminine, because she feels that safety and she feels like she can hand you these responsibilities that she had and you can better handle them, and she can finally be more soft and be a woman.
And you create that as a man, just like we've talked about many times about the analogy of planting a garden, right? You get what you plant. The woman is the plant, and you create the soil and the fertile conditions, which either get you a nagweed or a beautiful blossom.
Yeah, and you're planting a nagweed the second you say, "What do you bring to the table?"
Exactly, and just we were talking about this the other night too. Is as an example to understand how this works. Imagine if you have a boy. If you're a man and you're raising a boy, you don't want to coddle that boy. Right? You want to expose him to the world. You want him to toughen up, right? You don't want to protect him all the time. You got to let him scrape his knee and do those things. Because why? Because you don't want him to be weak. You don't want him to be to be feminine as a man, right? You want him to be strong. You want him to be masculine, to be manly. You don't want him to be fragile, right? You want him to be the opposite of fragile, which is strong. Right. And so if you imagine that overly shielding a boy would make him feminine, then now you understand why you have to overly shield a woman to allow her to be feminine. You will create the environment. You think that as a man, you don't have that power. You think you have to go to some other country in order to find a woman that's already like that, which, newsflash, they're not going to be all the way already. They might have conservative values, but that doesn't mean that they're actually living totally in their feminine. And even if they were, if you take that plant and you take it out of its soil where it was getting the nutrition it needed.
And it was protected.
Right.
In a lot of those cultures, they're protected by their fathers until a man comes along.
And now you plant it into your garden, which has no protection, which
has shitty soil.
Right. Do you
No
think
water.
that it's going to stay feminine? It's not. It's going to start to become masculine. So yeah, you could live over there, but even if you live over there, you're still bringing your garden with you because it's your house.
Right.
And so it's a delusion to think that's, you would, if you raised a boy, right? And for guys that are raising a boy, you know that you have to expose him to the world. You know that if you shield him too much, he will start to display feminine attributes. And so why would you not think that a woman, given that protection and shielding, would not start, even if she was rough, that she would start to display feminine attributes? It makes sense to me.
No, it does. And I know you're not comparing women to children.
Yeah.
And I'm going to compare women to children, but not that we are children.
No.
But we talked about this the other night too, that, when you're a kid and you're like, let's say like 6, you're just doing whatever you want to do. You're not worried about getting hurt. You're not worried about whatever, because you know that your parents will be there. You know that it'll be fine. Like, you'll figure it out. Like, you're just going for it because you have this protection of your parents and that, like, everything. You're not thinking of this actively because you're 6 years old.
Sure, yeah.
But the way that they behave is in a way that they know that they have safety, that even if something bad goes wrong,
Right.
mom and dad will be there to help, right? They have that protection. And even if you don't, like as a kid, have maybe your parents as a protection, it's just, you know, maybe you could say that you don't understand the risks and things like that. And there is some truth to that. But there is something about the safety of the family unit that kids have, and that allows them to be more outspoken or take more risks or do things like that because they have that safety. And then, you know, as a woman, when you start becoming like a teenager and, you know, going to high school and definitely when you go to college, you're kind of being prepared to be an independent woman. And again, you do need that because I do think it's valuable for women not to feel like they just have to pick a guy because they need somebody to protect them, right? Like they should know how to protect themselves in case they ever needed to. And so you're kind of learning those things in your teen years and obviously like into your 20s and things like that. But when the switch flipped and you came along, it was kind of like being like a child again. It was kind of that like, I don't want to say totally carefree because when you're adult, there's obviously things that are going to be on your mind. But it was almost like feeling like a child again in the sense of that I didn't have all these masculine responsibilities. I could just be feminine. I could just be a woman for like the first time. Because you're not even a woman when you're a girl. You're a girl. But it was like being a woman without the stress of the masculine responsibilities and what being independent like makes you have to do.
Yeah.
And so it does kind of feel freeing like you're a kid again in some ways.
Yeah.
And it's a great feeling. Like that's why we started this whole podcast.
Yeah.
Like I was the independent, like I talked about it in the other episode that came out not that long ago. Like I was like, I don't need a man. And I was fully content of, you know, staying single until I met the right person. And I'm glad that I did, honestly. But, you know, when you came along and you showed me this dynamic that like I didn't think even really existed, because I watched, you know, romance movies and, you know, occasionally read a romance book every once in a while. And I get the appeal that these women have to these men, right? But it's like when you live that life, no romance novel or romance movie even holds a candle to how it is in real life, living with someone that makes you feel so safe and protected and loved and cherished. And yeah, so the what do you bring to the table just sends men in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Like, and they don't even realize that they're making their own lives harder, right? Because they want the balance. Like everybody wants the balance. That's what causes the peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can't have balance if you're making a woman more masculine. And you're not even going to get a woman, honestly, if you hate all women or you think they're all bad.
Right.
Because that will come out one way or another and set you up for failure.
Better than perfect, we stand.